I don't know what that is.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming out to this panel discussion. My name's Bob Downs. I'm the festival manager this year. Very lucky to be working with the Sarasota Film Festival here in the town I grew up in. We have a sidebar with the festival this year that's brought to you by a sponsorship with JDH Associates. This is a new focus for the festival on connecting the community with environmental issues and using the visionary connecting power of film to bring visibility and introduce new ideas to the community about environmental issues. And exploiting the power that film and art has to make these issues relevant to members of the community. We have a number of films that are connected to this in the sidebar, such as Citizen Jane, which just showed earlier today. There's Let There Be Light, a documentary about the current advances being made in nuclear fission for energy. River Blue, a local film called Sarasota Half in Dream, and several others. There's a sheet on the table in the lobby with more information on those films that I hope you'll pick up and look into those more on your way out. I just want to briefly introduce the panelists that we have here today for the discussion. Karen Murphy is the director of the Sarasota Urban Design Studio. She works for the city of Sarasota. She has over 20 years of experience working both in the public sector at the county and city level, and also in the private sector, running her own firm, planning and consulting firm. She is currently involved in designing a new form-based code for the city of Sarasota. She has managed the design of such codes in Bradenton, and she's a very experienced and talented urban designer, passionate about environmental issues. Next we have Emily Gorman, who is a strategic campaign manager with the Sierra Club, Suncoast Sierra Club of Florida. She spearheaded a Ready for 100 program in St. Pete, which resulted in a commitment by the city of St. Pete to transition to 100% clean energy infrastructure. And we're very happy to have her on our panel today. And we have Stevie Freeman Montez, who is currently the sustainability manager for the city of Sarasota, working both within the city to improve efficiency and practices towards the goal of sustainability, and also working to reach out to the public to advance issues of sustainability and environmentalism with the public. And now I'm going to let each of you introduce yourselves a little more thoroughly.
Start with me. Okay, thank you very much for the introduction. I want to put something to all of you first and get a little bit of an idea. How many of you were able to attend the film either today or one of the other showings, Citizen Jane? So I know, great. That's a very exciting movie for me to go to. I was telling my husband, in the planner world, of course, Jane Jacobs is our rock star. And so it's a very timely discussion. So even though Jane Jacobs in the film, and we were talking about her epic battle, as a neighborhood advocate out of New York and the Greenwich Village area with Robert Moses, and the time and the issues of that time frame in the early 60s, where New York was experiencing an urban renewal, where they were going in and wiping out, the character and wonderful historic structures in New York to do these large housing compounds to help with some of our social problems. And they thought, and the approach that they took and what they learned from those lessons. So it's, even though the movie made us all cheer and wonder, how can that, how could that happen? How wonderful that we've overcome that. And unfortunately, those battles were over 50 years ago. But we can look around ourselves here in Southwest Florida, and I can tell you that the same battle is alive and well, but in different format. So I was raised here. I have had a love of planning, probably since I came out of the womb. I had a grandmother who never drove a car. And so my father died when I was young, and she watched me quite often. And so she took me to explore the city and learn all about the life and the diversity and everywhere we went at that level and that scale. So I was very fortunate in that, but I also was able to see here, I was young then, in the city of Dayton, Ohio. And we had family here, and so we spent time here as well, and then I was raised here and went to school from a young age. And seeing how we got around Sarasota, all of the wonderful, again, the places that we had, and the walkable areas, and the exploration and the freedom of movement, and those social and opportunities in the public realm spaces. And then to see how we've experienced the impact of the car. So in my work, I try to use a lot of those principles to inform, the work. And the most recent example of that was I was part of the team that did the Bradenton form-based code. So if you've gone up to Bradenton near the Riverwalk areas, and how they didn't want to lose their historic structures. They had the roadway, they could see the writing on the wall with Manatee Avenue and these other areas. And they said, we have to get in front of this. This is not the future that we want. We want these, mixed use and walkable places. I had also worked for the city of Sarasota when we did the downtown master planning with Andres Dwani. I was a city employee and redevelopment specialist there. So my job was to, after they had done the master planning, was to take and do the downtown rezoning and help to implement some of the catalyst projects that would get people living downtown again. So projects such as Whole Foods, back sort of in the 80s, early 80s, we didn't have people really living downtown. The flight of the suburbs, we had two waves here in Sarasota. We had the flight to the suburbs, where suddenly people were going, out of the cities and in single-family houses, very car-dependent, started separating our uses, and more our vehicle miles traveled increased. And the second wave of that, sort of a 1-2 punch, was in a little bit of competition for that. The city then, back in about between 72, I think it was either 72 or 74, they did a huge citywide rezoning that suburbanized the city. So those lovely neighborhoods that we see, such as Laurel Park, that have a beautiful 50-foot lot size, and they're not dominated by a big garage frontage. Suddenly, more and more of those things became, if not difficult, in some cases illegal to build the stuff we really did like, live-work units, small apartment complexes. So in doing that as urbanists, one of the things, I love cities, but one of the reasons I am an urbanist is because I'm an environmentalist as well. And in the topic of sustainability, that car-dominated pattern is unsustainable. We cannot protect our environment, our quality of life, and both of these ladies are going to tell you the impacts on that as well. Whether it's our sea level rise or native habitats, we have to be smart in how we absorb our growth and our density. And in lieu of the movie some of us watched, at a scale that we feel comfortable with and as a human scale, we can have a mix of housing types. In our type of coding, it's actually, I don't want to talk in jargon, in form-based coding, our model is actually derived from the ecological transect. So when you think of that in Sarasota, you'll think of, what do we have across that spectrum? We go from a dune system across our environmental form to uplands and the wetlands and things that we see as we head into the more rural areas of the county. Well, cities have settlement patterns too. And in our type of coding, we recognize that and we look at that increment and that spectrum. We look at that intensity and we use like a 1 to 6 ranking in that. So 1 being the most rural you can think of out near Wauchula, other areas. The 2 being where we start to see a settlement pattern that we would for large ranch housing. 3 is where we're used to, most of us, the subdivision pattern that we see picked up, Lakewood Ranch areas and some of those others. And then 4, we start to see, more small apartment complex, live-work units, a little bit of opening those uses, and a little bit denser in what we see on our urban streets. 5, we can see downtown, for those of you that walk all around town, like a Citrus Square type of height. And then, of course, our downtown core that has 10 and 18-story buildings. Well, back when we have the good fortune of having a beautiful historic plan that was done by John Nolan back in the 20s, and a lot of that fabric is still here. Nolan was an amazing planner that really did these layouts for walkable communities. We didn't have the impacts of the car, particularly then, with view terminus and great spaces that are integrated into our built environment. So we saw in the movie what happens when our streets are dead, what happens when we don't care about the life on the street and we lose that, and we give that over to the car, and how it really starves our cities and eventually blights them. Well, your planners today don't have the luxury that we did with Nolan. We have to come in and do that with infill, and we have to balance all of these interests that we have from everybody, and that's why we set the studio up the way that we did. We knew we needed a long community conversation to do that, because if Jane Jacobs taught us nothing else, this is not me doing your code, it's us doing your code together. So Brianna, I think Brianna's here, Brianna Dobbs, my partner in the studio, she and I have put many hours into really not sitting in the studio, but to be inclusive and bring all of you in different formats. but in getting out with the community. We did walking audits of every neighborhood to create your code. So how do we look at knitting that density back in? I know some of the community conversation has been on a project called The View, the large one over there at Gulfstream. A lot of community conversation on those particular projects. But you also need to know that some of the most controversial work is actually reintroducing things like a townhome pattern. That is, nothing else will rile people up like you wouldn't believe. And what? A townhome? I can't have townhomes near my single family housing, or those small apartment complexes that make these spaces very, environmentally friendly, because we don't have as much, resources devoted to hermetically sealed buildings. We have more where we can open our windows, get out on that balcony, and be part of our city. So we're sensitive to that. And part of our job is to work, as we showed on the slide, how that can be, that density it doesn't all have to look like these large towers or other concentrations, but knitting that back and restoring the fabric that we once had. A huge part of that is transit. We have got to stop this autocentric pattern that we have going. We can witness this going on out near the interstate with how we have wiped out huge swatches of the environment out there to move cars. And we're not different than other cities. When we talked about Jane Jacobs, Jacobs actually lived that in the 60s. We should learn from these lessons, that we never widen car roadways our way out of that situation. Many of the cities, many of you have probably come down here from cities that did have very rich transit networks. Some from West Coast, Portland, or out in Seattle. Those cities didn't become transit ready overnight, but the time to plan for that is now. What a lot of people don't know is that we had transit. Right out there at Fruitville, where the bowling alley is, there's train tracks that we're looking at the Legacy Trail right now for. That was passenger rail that connected to Tampa. When we had those areas, and it went from Tampa down to Venice, our main streets were very active places. People would come to those depots and they would walk all the way down to the bayfront. So going back in and planning for this type of stuff and saying, we say rails with trails, preserve the ability to have both the legacy trail and that ability to have sustainability, which is for future generations to meet their transportation needs without us all sort of destroying Florida in the process. So that's what I work on mainly, and I'm sure you'll have a lot of questions regarding that, but I'll kick over.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Emily?
Awesome. Really awesome to hear a little bit about what you do, Karen. I have to say that I'm kind of an urban planning groupie. I am, as Bob mentioned, a campaign manager, but I'm also a sustainability consultant, which means I get to do a little bit of climate planning and energy management work, and we are always looking to the urban planners. So that was like a really cool 5 minutes for me. But I was asked, I think, to be part of this panel today, mostly because of my work with the Sierra Club. So I've spent the last year working with the Sierra Club Florida and also the Suncoast Group, which is mostly Pinellas County. They focus on St. Petersburg and Clearwater, Gulfport, and Dunedin primarily, but also the unincorporated areas in between. And I was lucky enough to run my first environmental campaign. I have a history in fundraising and awareness, but I had never run an environmental or a sustainability campaign specifically. So it was a huge blessing for me because I've been an environmental advocate all my life, and bringing my assets to an area that I was really passionate about was just more than a blessing. So we started March last year, and in about 8 months, we ran a business pilot, a residential pilot. We touched thousands of area residents. We brought in hundreds of volunteers, and we did this all with the purpose of pushing the city of St. Petersburg closer to 100% renewable energy. And when we say renewable energy, we mean things like solar, wind, naturally replenishing sources, getting away from dirty fossil fuels. And so we had kind of like a 5-step process that we talked about. We needed to educate the community as to what a 100% clean energy path looks like, what other elements are important in the energy system. And the first thing that we figured out was that most people don't understand the energy system and how they connect to it. Most people can tell you how much a gallon of gas costs or how much a gallon of milk costs, but they can't tell you what a kilowatt hour costs or how much they're really paying on their electric bills. They might be able to tell you an aggregate in a month, but not really why it's fluctuating or what those little units come down to. So the first thing we did was try to normalize the conversation. Okay, why is this important? How does this matter? Can we make this part of your everyday life, the way you're thinking about how you interact with your washing machine and your city council all at the same time? So we were a local extension of a national campaign, Ready for 100. We rebranded locally as 100% St. Pete. And so all of our initiative was very centered on the city. So when we talked about energy costs, we were talking about City of St. Pete energy costs. We were talking about Pinellas County energy costs. The Ready for 100 campaign nationally does a lot of good work. They have moved 25 cities to commit to 100% clean energy, which is incredible. But when we talk about energy issues on a city scale, we have to talk about local solutions, local problems. And one of the beautiful things about working not just in the energy industry, but in sustainability is that when you're building solutions, you should be solving problems that already exist. So when we talked about transitioning to 100% clean energy, we were also talking about energy efficiency. We were also talking about updating the grid, which is a problem that all of our investor-owned utilities deal with. We were talking about smart meters and bringing in the latest, greatest software technology, and how can we improve the local economy, and what are our equity problems right now? What are the problems that we're seeing in the city of St. Pete that are outside of the energy system or are thought to be outside the energy system, but can be solved with a sustainability solution? So we had a really great response from the city of St. Petersburg. I think like Sarasota, we have a very environmentally conscious community. We were trying to build that environmental awareness, but I get the feeling that Sarasota is similar to St. Petersburg in the sense that we had a community that understood the need to move away from fossil fuels. So from an organizational perspective, we ran a 7-point campaign, and I'm going to share these with you because I think that these are 7 areas that any organization or any group trying to undertake a sustainability or a clean energy planning initiative should consider. The first one, the most important thing, is partnerships. So when you think about building support, first thing you think about is, okay, who are the big players in the room and how do I get them on my side? But partnerships are much more than convincing people to support your initiatives. Partnerships are about building transformational relationships. What I mean when I say that is when we went to the Chamber of Commerce, what we needed to establish was, okay, we're here to support your initiatives as you are here to support our initiatives. We need to be in a back and forth relationship where we're growing together, where we're progressing together. So all of the nonprofits and the for-profit institutions that signed up to support and partner with the Suncoast Sierra Club, we're trying to build two-way relationships, not just standing up as an aspirational, yes, go team go, but actually building a dialogue and creating a real relationship. The other thing that's really important is resources. Usually you have a lot of resources existing in a city or a county or a community that can help homeowners or residents lower their energy costs. They can help them figure out what their carbon footprint is like. And usually the gap here is that people are not being connected to those resources. So as a volunteer network, as an advocacy organization, we needed to connect our residents with the resources that were already available to them. The other big piece of that, obviously, is awareness. We just talked about normalizing the conversation, but the concept of communication often feels like a chore for advocacy organizations, and I would imagine probably for city and county governments too. You feel like you have to be constantly pushing out and meeting deadlines, and every 2 weeks you need to send out an email blast, and did we hit our social media goals? And communication, when we joined the Sierra Club, we wanted to make sure that we had champions and advocates who felt prepared to speak on our behalf. So that when we were building awareness and when we were relying on our communication network, we had a series of people who were prepared to talk about these issues. And that brings us to organizational capacity, so training. So when we needed to rely on volunteers to show up, or we needed to activate that communication network, we needed to have people in the community who were prepared to talk about these issues, who understood what our long-term goals were, who understood what the real situation was in the city. So building out volunteer teams who had the kind of training and the support they needed to maintain the momentum, because the other side of this is that any sustainability initiative, any clean energy initiative is a long-term initiative. Yes, you're going to have some short-term specific goals. We had 8 months to encourage a city commitment, but the transition to 100% clean energy is a 10-year timeline. So if the citizens of St. Petersburg were not prepared to see a 10-year timeline, then a city commitment that happened in a year wouldn't necessarily fruit the kind of results that we needed in 10 or 15 years, which is 100% clean energy. So building that organizational capacity, training our volunteers and our lay people to understand these complex issues was really important. The other big thing there is working with businesses and residents to pilot new technology. So solar often sounds like a really good idea, but kind of scarily expensive. But when you meet people who have gone solar, usually you find out that it's not as expensive as it sounds, and it's not as complex as you thought it would be. So demonstrating on the ground that these technologies work. And regardless of what the sustainability initiative might be, having a concrete, tangible example of this is the solution that we're working towards really helps people picture it in their own lives and picture a future that includes this kind of technology or this kind of solution. So that's true for both. In our case, we were working with both businesses and residents because they're on such completely different scales. You know, a business solar and homeowner solar are totally different situations. The costs are very different. You may have the same provider, but at the end of the day, businesses have much more access to capital. They are better prepared to take these steps usually. So it was a different kind of demonstration. And then, of course, the biggest piece with any sustainability initiative is the long-term plan, is how are we going to hit that 10-year timeline? How are we going to hit that 15-year goal? How much does this cost? What kind of impact does this have on our local economy, on our homeowners? You know, can we answer some of the questions as to the peripheral effects of this solution that we're proposing? And that's where city planning, I think, really plays a key role. City planners are, in my opinion, better prepared to look at the resources that the city has and allocate them effectively over a long-term timeline like that. So those 7 pieces are really how we brought together a clean energy campaign that was not just invigorating for our residents, but also convincing to our elected officials. So I'm sorry if I've been long-winded here. I told Bob to give me a signal if I talk too much.
It's super interesting. I wanted to let you get through that
sorry
list.
About that.
Yeah, thank you so much. And our third panelist, Stevie, our sustainability manager here in Sarasota.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say thank you to the Sarasota Film Festival for having this sidebar and this focus. I mean, it's really incredible to keep these issues in front of everybody's minds and to highlight such important issues on a global and local scale. It was neat to see all the different films spanning such wide-ranging topics and from local to global. So I thought I'd just expand a little bit on what my role is at the City of Sarasota, because it is somewhat of a unique title to have as a sustainability manager, and some local governments don't have that role yet. And then I'll talk a little bit about a couple key initiatives that I think are relevant to the conversation today. So as the sustainability manager, I'm in the city manager's office, but I work on kind of 2 themes of initiatives. And one is looking at City of Sarasota as a business, as a closed kind of system, all of our buildings and our assets, our vehicles, all those things that the City of Sarasota owns, and how we can reduce our environmental footprint and be more efficient with our resources within us as a business. So how can we create less waste, use less water, consume less energy, you know, all those types of things within our buildings themselves and our operations. And then I also have kind of community-facing efforts where I do work with city planners often on comprehensive plan updates and policies and code work, tree protection ordinance recently we worked on last year, and some community-wide efforts to also integrate those similar principles community-wide, so that it's kind of a unique role in that sense. And there's two main projects that I'm really excited about that I think the city of Sarasota has been progressive in undertaking. And one is our climate change adaptation plan. Our city commission unanimously approved the use of some BP oil spill funds, Deepwater Horizon funds, which I find is a unique funding source for a planning effort like this, but it's very appropriate. And we began the process of looking at scientific projections related to climate change, such as sea level rise, storm surge, flooding and precipitation, and heat days, and what this localized science projections are saying for our area. And that whole first step of looking at the projections and understanding the science was really critical for city staff to just get more comfortable with climate data. And so we did a lot of training, a lot of internal meetings to say, okay, this is science, this is the projections, this is what it's based on. There's observed data for sea level rise, for example, from St. Petersburg that's very localized, that we can input a local rate of change we've already been experiencing and localize our sea level rise projections. And it's just gotten us a lot more comfortable talking about these issues. And then what we're doing is looking at city assets, things that the city owns in our transportation, such as roads and bridges, our transportation sector, our stormwater, outfalls to the bay, and how, for example, how high they are above mean high tide, and what that means for sea level rise and storm surge projections in the future. So we're looking at transportation, stormwater, water supply, wastewater system, our shorelines, and our emergency management operations, and our parks. So I think there's about 5 or 6 key sectors within city operations that we own, and we're overlaying and looking at those projections to sea level rise and storm surge and flooding and heat days, and trying to understand where we're vulnerable. And where we're vulnerable, then we're going through we're actually in that step right now, step 3 of 6. And once we understand where we're vulnerable, then we'll prioritize them based on different criteria we'll look at. We'll get public input to help us prioritize our vulnerabilities. And then we'll create adaptation strategies or identify adaptation strategies for our greatest vulnerabilities. And really, the whole reason we're doing this, it's a real technical process and planning effort. But we're doing it to be more resilient. We know that the city we're responsible for providing really critical public services into the future. We need to be thinking about our assets, and when we make a big city investment or have a big decision in front of us, we need to make sure we're thinking about and integrating these considerations from the forefront. And so that's what that whole planning process is about, and it's really exciting. It's going really well. And then the other part that's a little related to climate work, that's probably what I'm most passionate about that I get to work on. Well, it's all related to the issues that we'll talk about today, but is our climate change mitigation work, or our greenhouse gas emission work. So we also look at not only how adaptation, but we look at how can we plan and do projects that reduce our greenhouse gas emissions community-wide. So one of my projects that I work on is a greenhouse gas inventory, and we've done one for 2003, 2005, and we just completed one last year, but it was for 2015. So we look at community-wide emissions, and we also do a greenhouse gas inventory for city operations to understand what our emissions are from different sources. So really, very specifically, we get all the energy use from FPL, Florida Power and Light, for the commercial sector, residential sector, industrial sector. We also get their fuel mix of how they're supplying this electricity to us, and it helps us better understand what our emissions are from each of those sectors based on our localized fuel supply. And that helps us understand what our demand is causing elsewhere the city of Sarasota electricity demand community-wide and within our operations is causing in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. And we also look at transportation, fuel pipe emissions, and solid waste data. So I have a lot of data in that regard, but it helps us prioritize and understand what we need to do better on and where we've made progress on as well. So those are kind of two key projects that I think are important when we're talking about how to plan for the future and how to be resilient into the future. And I'm happy to answer any questions, but I'll stop there, I think.
That's great. And
Thank you.
I have a short list of questions that I've prepared. I'm really curious, Stevie, if you're not talked out, I'm gonna start close. It seems like, reading a little bit about your position, it seems like a big challenge, because it's sort of broad and intangible, is that you're sort of involved in creating a public conversation and sort of fostering really like a cultural shift towards more awareness of ways people can affect, their environment, and, understanding and working towards goals of sustainability. And I'm curious what sorts of things you're doing and what maybe you've learned since taking on this role about how you can make those connections. You're in a really data-heavy field, and it can be hard to bring that data home for people who are just living every day in the community and have certain habits and have, lived in a certain frame of mind for a long time, even generationally. And maybe you could speak to that a little bit.
Definitely. That's a tough question in a lot of ways, because I do balance, I do think often about the scope of my position and how to balance kind of long-term planning with just getting projects in the grounds that people see, that are very visible, and that help move visibly the cultural change forward. But really, I think one important aspect to any of this gets a little bit to what Emily was speaking about, is if we're trying to do projects that help shift people's behaviors and change culture, we have to be out in the community, and we have to be working with others. There's no way that the city can do it by ourselves or even by any single policy, and there's no way that we should. I mean, really, it's needs to be a partnership. So one important thing for me is to get out and talk to people a lot, and just speak a lot, listen a lot, and go to a lot of community events. I've been here since 2015, so I'm a little newer than a lot of the folks in the room, I'm sure. But just getting out a lot and listening a lot, and balancing long-term planning with community partners with visible projects that people see when they walk down the streets, or that they have to engage in, is kind of my approach to it right now. Does that answer a little bit?
Yes.
I was going to say, I think in one of the other film series that we have is with the Sarasota Half Awake.
Half in Dream.
Half in Dream. I'm thinking of being awoke, but that is exactly, Stevie does a wonderful job, and she works with us quite a bit too, is getting people to see these things in the smaller scale that impacts their day-to-day life. So, for example, we work, all of us, in an interdisciplinary fashion. Part of the work that I do with her, we hold a group once a month with the estuary program and our public works people, because when we show you when all of these things are working in harmony between the built environment and the natural environment, we have great cities as well. So take something like a bioswale. Love a bioswale, but if I start to put a bioswale on Main Street, it's going to hurt your walkability. It's not the right context for that bioswale. So a lot of the work that we do is in making sure, and we could go maybe one street over where the neighborhood, a walk to town neighborhood, where we then knit those in. So that is a huge part of I think, in the public education and the model projects that Stevie does that are really making a difference at the city.
I also want to mention I'm a big believer in community-based social marketing approaches,
Yes.
which really has a bunch of fascinating tactics, and maybe you could talk about it more than I could. But using different marketing tactics to encourage behavior change for positive behaviors is a field that I would like to see the city use more and more.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Can I just comment on
Absolutely.
CBSM? So community-based social marketing is like the love of my life. It's an idea that we borrow from Canada, actually. And the whole idea, the whole concept is that you increase incentives and you lower barriers. And that's the name of the game. If you can just do that over and over and over again and better, you have a community by your side, really.
Yeah, I mean, it can be a real challenge, beyond just visibility, getting people to see what's happening and what they can do, just to get them to see it and then think about it in the context of, sustainability and how their actions and their relationship with these, their local environment and the things that are happening in their city, how they are taking part in it, wittingly or and
I don't know if anyone else, maybe we're the pioneers. We walked, here from the Hollywood 20, and one of the things that I like to do when I'm out doing the walking audits, I took a moment to do with my husband, which is listening to our streets too. So in having him, I know the strategic places to stop from doing it, but things that we might not think about. I know folks that move here will love palm trees. I love our native palm trees, but a lot of folks that move here like palm trees from other places. So they plant a lot of palm trees that may be from the Dominican Republic or from Madagascar. And although those look like palm, what would be the big deal about palms? Well, all the way down to the level of what the bugs eat. Our bugs didn't evolve to eat those vegetation. So they're not food for our birds here. And so I'll take people and stop, and we fight quite regularly for native species all over, and we saved a patch not far from here of cabbage palms.
I'm sure everyone in this room loves a nice shabby cabbage palm.
That's right. They're hard to, when you're looking at, everyone likes our native royal. So, I actually always sing that song, "We will never be royals," to the cabbage palms. But they're important to our environment. They are truly, without those, we don't have the beauty of many other things that we take for granted. So when you stop and you're walking, whether it's in the city or the most isolated, great slice of nature, stop and listen to these things. And I think you'll discover in your own city as well where those activities, you can hear the birds singing, and and then you'll walk and you'll stop and you'll see a dead zone or hear a dead zone. And become aware of those things and how those differences, we all often look for the bigger things, and those are important too. We all work on those, but it is those changes that even us as individuals can make when we do our planting and gardening.
Indeed. Emily.
Bob.
As a result of the program that you were working with in St. Pete, the city of St. Pete committed $250,000 of their BP oil leak funds to implementing the Sustainability Action Plan to go towards, that's what it's called, right?
Yep. The acronym we're using is ISAP.
ISAP.
The Integrated Sustainability Action Plan.
Yeah.
Yep. And
Right.
actually, the $250,000 is not just to implement part of the plan; it's to write the plan.
Right. And they've also committed portions of those funds to an energy efficiency audit and collaboration with the surrounding county to assess vulnerability in the future to environmental impacts, which we're also working on here in Sarasota, I've learned recently. I'm curious your perspective from the private sector, without making direct comparisons between our community and St. Pete. How close do you see the political structure in Sarasota to making a similar sort of commitment, like a really tangible commitment like that to working with the community towards defined goals?
So I have to say that that is a difficult question for me to answer, just because I have limited experience with Sarasota. I've vacationed here, and I really like spending time here, but I've never worked here. So that's a difficult thing to say. I do, if I was going to postulate, I would say that you guys have a very environmentally conscious community, so you're probably going to have a lot of broad-based support. I imagine your elected officials probably reflect that sentiment. We're very lucky in St. Petersburg that we do have a very progressive city council, and some of them would object to that term, but they're kind of cutting edge. So I would expect that Sarasota would have something similar. The question then becomes, one, what are your existing city planning documents? Are they up for review anytime soon? Is there somewhere that you can integrate this already? And two, do you have the funds and the capacity to do so? Now, it sounds like you guys have an internal department. You have a sustainability department.
Or person.
You have a person. See, and this was an obstacle for us, too, because we have a person.
But there's a lot of definitely other staff working on similar issues, but in terms of dedicated just to sustainability. But I can give a little insight to that question myself, because we've been meeting with St. Petersburg very often to learn about this 100% renewable energy commitment, and met with Sierra Club staff with a coalition of community members that have formed called the Climate Justice Coalition fairly recently, that is also gearing up to ask City of Sarasota commissioners to make a similar commitment and to join the Ready for 100 campaign. And so I think there's momentum building. There hasn't been the official ask yet at a city commission meeting, so I don't know, for sure how it would go, but there does seem to be community effort that's going into that, and we're understanding from St. Pete how they would actually reach those goals and what process they're taking to try to develop strategies. And we do have, one thing that helps on our side is that we do have comprehensive plan policies, and we do have some documents that commit us to a 35% greenhouse gas reduction by 2025 community-wide. And so that helps us say, well, this is a potential way to help us reach that existing target we already have.
On that note, Ready for 100 is expanding across the state. So there's a Sarasota-based group, there's a Tampa-based group, there's one in Miami. We're having a lot of interest. Since St. Petersburg made the commitment, we've had a lot of interest across the state for similar groups and similar initiatives. And the thing I think that really made us most attractive to city planning was that we asked for a feasibility study. So we asked to say, okay, you don't necessarily have to do it the way that we say that you should do it. We want solar, frankly, but we'll talk about different ways to reach 100% renewable energy, but will you run a feasibility study and figure out how much this is going to cost, how we can get it done, where that money would come from, and how those costs impact our residents? Because equity, again, is a big deal for us. We did not want to drive out any of our low-income residents by driving up the cost of energy consumption. So.
Yeah, it's a really ambitious program that has had impressive results, and I think it, coming from living elsewhere in the country right now, I think eschews a lot of the ideas that a lot of people have about Florida, and I'm looking forward to having conversations about when I go back home.
Thank you.
Yeah. Karen. Yeah. So I was interested to learn that part of the design studios, an integral part of the mission really, is seeking involvement from the community in, forming your goals and forming really the whole agenda of the design studio. And you're at the end of nearing the end of a long 4-year process of building this new code. And I'm curious what you have learned over the course of this project about effective outreach, the tenor of interest in this type of project, which I'm sure can be difficult for a lot of people to really think about. A lot of individual community members from different layers of the community, and how you found this avenue towards environmentalism how you've made it more accessible to an average citizen.
I would say that I learn something every single day from, as much as I can do with public education and outreach. The best ambassadors and people who inform my work are the people that we get out and talk to. They know their communities. We have tried to make this, I can truthfully say this is the most public participation I have ever done on any project. We have talked to thousands and thousands of people. One of the reasons when the city asked me to come and to do this that I was hesitant. I told my husband, have a drink. I'm going to talk to you about going back to work in government for a while. And all that entails, because you really do work in a fishbowl. Your privacy is always open. But there is such a reward for that as well. And where our community was, it's sometimes hard doing this in your own city. It's a blessing and a curse. It's nice to know things and know where they're at, but you'll also always be that person that ran through somebody's backyard when you were 9 or 10, and they won't ever forget that, no matter how many credentials you get. And that is still good, because it also makes you have to be very humble. It makes you have to say, constantly check yourself and know when you go back to the community. We do multiple feedback loops, and I just had some folks in the studio. We set it up so we're constantly bringing in different perspectives, and then we'll mix it up and bring them in together to get them to see different things as well. So that is a huge part of how we've done the outreach. The other thing that we did was early on to say to folks, pick something that's a challenge in these different areas of the city, so that we can demonstrate the type of coding that we do, so that we can show you how all of these pieces work together. The streets, the trees, the building facades. And so one of the projects that has been very successful that we began was up at Water Tower Park. So I don't know if any of you have had the opportunity to use this park. But when we first arrived out there, it was pretty dominated by illicit activity. There were two things happening. There was in the environmental component, we had a lot of invasive and exotic species taking over, but there was a lot of nuisance exotic activities that were going on because of the lack of natural surveillance on this park. So we reached out and we got the police, the neighbors, the business community, people from estuary and the environmental community, and we did a walking audit there. And we showed them the ways in which our work, thinning out those exotic species, designing infrastructure for connectivity in a light imprint design way, starting with the density that's so desperately needed for our students and other people up in the North Trail area, starting to have those, when we did that infill, to show how we could reverse the trend and have that infill look onto the park. And we did that through some unique ways. We did a potato vine roundup, and we all pulled 2 tons of potato vine. Yeah. And then we went back with them and showed the boards and through the coding how we would then reinforce that to achieve those things. So that's a little bit of an example.
That's great. That kind of answers the second part of that question that I had too. Okay, we have about 20 minutes left. 10 or 20 minutes, and we have definitely, I think, a few questions. So we're going to bring a mic around and try and find a few questions in the audience. Right here in front.
Hello, what's your name?
Hi, I'm George Chorba, and we live downtown. And coming from the film, one of the impressive things to me was the saving of Washington Square Park, close to my heart. I went to school there. We moved just opposite Bayfront Park, only to discover that a large portion of Bayfront Park is actually covered by macadam as a parking lot. And is there a way, I don't know whether this is a Sierra question or a city planning question, is there a way to make the park a park and not a parking lot? I know there are strong commercial interests there with Marina Jack and O'Leary's, but we have other places in the city to park. But that would be reversing what's already there. So,
Great, Karen.
I was going to say, this goes back to, again, what do we give to the automobile? You know, if we all are to look at, you know, as planners, we're told, oh, you're ridiculous. You're trying to get everyone to give their car up. No, we're not. What we're trying to do is get people to be less dependent on the automobile. We are trying to give the opportunity to those who don't want to have the car to not have one. And, you know, then again, for all of us to have, start taking, if we take 1 mile off that trip, the millions of trips over the course of a year. So in order for us to move forward and start to get this parking off this incredible land, I'll give you an example. We drive our cars on average 2 hours a day, but we devote space-wise more per capita to the car than we do to housing per person, than we do to our parks and open space. And you know, this is, we give it 3 parking spots in the inventory all over, is to start reducing these you know, minimum parking requirements, looking at, again, we've got to grow the transit. If we were to take where the college is, I work on transit in the region and some of these initiatives, and we're the most transit ready in the city. We have the most diverse population. In the northern part of Sarasota and in the southern part of Manatee, we have the most people without a car. We have the most people with 1 car. We have the lowest socioeconomic range in that area as well, that would benefit from the housing, less reliant on the car. So if we start to look at that college area and get those running, better headway times, better bus, treat our bus riders better, they will ride it, and we'll have to devote less space to that. That is the key.
Yeah, hard to
Thank
know
you.
for
Next
sure
question.
where to start with that issue.
Sir?
You can have it on a poster.
How would a condominium complex begin trying to move to a green system?
I think in looking at having the energy, I would devote to that swap over as far as if they wanted to convert to more energy efficiencies and things like that. We look at things also in the natural. I like a lot of building interface that's naturally designed. If you go out and look at our environment now, look how hermetically sealed up our buildings are. You know, there's a lot of these buildings, the way they're sited, that if they had operable windows, you would pick a breeze up. You know, you can't do that in the high-rise level. But at the lower floors, I know Stevie does a lot of education on the fixtures and other things as well.
I was just going to mention that I know Florida Power and Light, through a renewable energy agreement that we have with them here in the city of Sarasota, they'll come out to condos and single-family homes and provide free energy audits and give you kind of a bag full of materials, letting you know the incentives you qualify for, and they'll actually give you some, you know, light bulbs and that type of thing. And also, we do have a part-time staff who does specifically recycling education they'll come on site and do a recycling kind of consultation. So those are 2 real tangible examples that you could get started with.
I just have a suggestion. I worked with a lot of condo owners in St. Petersburg, and I don't know if I'm on. I don't think I'm on. Am I on? Oh, good, I am on. And one of the biggest problems we had is that if you don't have your entire homeowners association on board, you're not going to be able to go building wide. So the first step that you need to take is to talk to the other condo owners in your building and form a group and get them on your side and get a vision going. The other thing I saw most successful with condos is HVAC. Usually we needed an HVAC upgrade to get any kind of drop in the cost. So those are the two things I would start with, is get your association on board and start talking about HVAC.
Thank you. Next question. Down there.
We have one down here.
Hey, I just wanted to shout out Sarasota Climate Justice Coalition all the way. I also wanted to shout out Ready for 100 because the Justice Coalition is fully embracing the Ready for 100 here in Sarasota. So
Are you on the Justice Coalition?
I am.
Do you have 5 minutes after this?
I do. Yeah.
Cool. I'll
Yeah,
see you
yeah,
in a
yeah.
few.
I also wanted to say I live in the Rosemary district. I'm seeing the densification going on. A lot of people have opinions about densification. Is there a way to, I mean, we like seeing densification, we like seeing people ride bikes. Is there a way to remedy that we're not seeing? I heard about pocket parks in initial plans and kinds of, is there stuff that we're not doing that we might help the
I think,
densification?
what the slide that I've passed out in the handout is in response to what happened in the Rosemary District. Again, we've always got to listen and receive what's going on out there in the public and the initiatives. And what ended up happening with the Rosemary, that was underway right when we first arrived. And they were doing the density bonus over there with we all know we have a shortage of affordable housing, a whole middle range of housing. We're short on affordable housing, student housing, workforce housing, artist housing, all that missing middle housing type. And the Rosemary is a beautiful scale to achieve it in that 5-story, that perfect Jane Jacobs walk-up metric. However, the thought being that if they gave a density bonus, that of course adding inventory would result in affordability. It does help, but we have such a deficit that without having a tie-in for you, the community, of that give and get, what we saw was we said, we wouldn't necessarily do the density bonus this way. We would suggest when this one expires, to listen to what we heard, which is what folks told us with the Rosemary. They like the vitality, we all like that, and the great diversity, but we lost green space. With 1,000 new households, as planners, we like to see, and the city's level of service is high, they like to see 10 acres for 1,000 new residents. We lost green space. We wanted to see a reduction in the car. Well, that density is bringing the car because we're not transit ready. We also didn't get the affordability we wanted. At all. Everyone I talk to, I agree. And so what we said in our density bonus that we've worked into the code, and it will. We've designed the code that this is what we would recommend, but we will have to pull it out if there's not community buy-in, and others will work on it when we're out of here. But we said, if you're going to do this density, do it in a give and get. And what we suggested was that for these bonus units, first of all, we were not going to give height. So, that wouldn't, we heard from the community. But we would say that you would produce a certain percentage. You pay or provide one of our missing housing types. And if you provide it, great. If you want to write the check, then it can be achieved through one of the many other programs that we have. Second thing you need to do to earn those units would be to provide green or open space. And we did this in a very creative way to say that you could preserve and bring these buildings, sculpt these buildings in to save trees. You could provide park spaces. You could maintain existing parks. You could donate other pocket park locations to earn that density. The third is that on top of the fees that the city charges for an automobile, you would either pay or provide something that helps make us more transit ready. It cannot be spent on the car. So that's our next wave of what we would recommend the city do to approach density long term.
Thank you.
Karen, what's an example of something that a developer like that could do to make that their project more transit ready?
More transit ready. We right now, one of our problems in the city is that where the growth is in the county. So we're seeing a lot of growth down in Northport, and with our electeds on the county level, we have three commissioners that are going to really want to serve those constituents. One of the victims of that is our bus system. You can't necessarily fault them, but what we're doing is we're running a lot of transportation that is not a great rate of return. I've actually had some folks tell me once, like some of these routes, they could buy the people cars cheaper than run it. Well, but that's the nature of politics. We're going to have to work that out as we go forward. What we would say is we need in the city to make us transit ready. We got to get those headway times for you guys down to like 15, at least a half hour would be good at this point. But to get those 15-minute headway times, to start to get better shelters so it's more dignified when you're waiting for the transit. Those are all the things that money could be allotted towards.
This isn't an example of a developer project that they could do, but I hope folks know about the new iRide that launched last week. Still, from my understanding, the app is still in process, but you can call or hail it. And it's a free electric vehicle, 6-passenger. There's 7 vehicles, and it will take you anywhere on demand in the downtown zone, from up to 14th, I believe, down to Mound, over to School, and then to 41. So it's a pretty good area. If you're in Rosemary and you want to get over to Selby Gardens or something, it'll get you there in an EV.
The other one that we've had on the books for quite a long time, we're going to have a private operator come start it up, is our water bus. So, if you run, it's dredged there near the Crosley, so I've actually gone out there. In the new college master plan, way back, we had them include that, a stop there, a stop near our cultural district, out where Moat Marine is, so that we can connect those trolleys, that run up and down Anna Marie Island. The numbers are up. They are looking great. People, if you run it, they'll take it if it's reliable. We have a great opportunity with the tourist population. Usually good transit systems, if you have a tourist population, we can grow those if we provide it and pay into it. And then as soon as the headway times come down, then the commuter takes it. So those are all initiatives that we're thrilled to see, coming to fruition.
That's great. I think we are very close to out of time. Maybe if we have one more quick question here, right behind you, Aaron.
My name is Steve McAllister. I'm actually a Sarasota native. And I was wondering, I've seen videos online of a lot of other places, and who knows if they're real, but they're actually building in gardens actually into their high-rise buildings, and rooftops aren't wasted. You've either got solar panels, which makes kind of sense here in the Sunshine State, or gardens, or those kind of things. Are there any of those kind of initiatives that you've seen come down the pike? I mean, I know a lot of development here, the only green in mind are reserve notes, but are there more developers who are coming in at all and saying, let's make this building more green, use the environment, use nature to make it more stable and more sustainable?
I would say yes, and one of the things we're doing with Stevie is that we're actually including in our code a sustainability chapter to show what that looks like across the spectrum. It's very different in a high-rise, how you would do that with a rooftop garden, to at the lower end, again, if you do something for the density, creating urban garden spaces. And
That's great.
And,
The opportunity for that in the code is really important. Stevie, is there any sort of incentive for developers to go that route? I'm sure it's more expensive.
I'm not aware of an incentive right now. I know there's different things that are currently allowed in our code that would allow that those projects, but we're not seeing a lot from the public or private sector coming and proposing that from what I've seen. But we do offer some fast track permitting and some sort of those types of incentives for green building, and I think some of those projects would allow for that, from my understanding. So there's some loose incentives, but I haven't seen a lot of it in my 2-year being proposed yet. I would love to, though.
Great. Well, unfortunately, we don't have enough time for many more questions. I was wondering if you'd each like to say a couple minutes to wrap up? Learned anything here today, maybe?
Sure. I'm just happy to see you all in the audience. Thank you for the opportunity. And Sarasota is an amazing place. It's a beautiful place, and the people here are so incredibly engaged, and we're really lucky to have this amount of involvement on these issues and passion about it. So thank you all. That's all I'll say.
I just have to say thank you guys so much for including me. I feel like there is a whole other side of Sarasota that I didn't know about, and I'm really excited to get my first glimpse here. And it sounds like you guys are doing some really incredible work, and I wish you all the best moving forward.
And again, I will offer my thanks as well on a Sunday at 4 o'clock that we're in the room caring about sustainability and good planning makes my heart just bound. I would just offer you all the opportunity to participate. We're on the city website, the design studio. We run a lot of events and opportunities for you guys to come in, see the work, and participate. And we look forward to doing the rest of the work with the community.
Great. And the Sarasota Film Festival obviously is thrilled to have 3 very inspiring women here on this panel, and really appreciative to everyone that came out. I think this is a pretty good turnout, and yeah, we're very happy, and I hope that everyone has gotten some questions answered today. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.